We're going to be talking about the Ukraine conflict today, and we're going to talk about specifically the neo-Nazis that were captured in Azovstal in Mariupol and what's going to happen with them. Specifically, also today and yesterday are two pretty pivotal days when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, because we've actually heard a lot of comments from the presidential administration in Ukraine about how the war is going. And despite, I'll start with that, despite what we've been told in the Western media for months and months, saying that the Ukrainians have successfully beaten back the Russians, that the military operation is just not at all what Russia planned in Ukraine. Despite all that, we've heard from the Ukrainian presidential advisor, Alexei Arestovich, either yesterday or today, I'm pretty sure it was today, that all is not well for the Ukrainian military, specifically in Donbass, where pretty much all the fighting is going on now at the basically close to the Ukrainian side of the territory. And Arestovich has said it's a critical situation for the Ukrainian military. He's finally admitted it. And this is a big piece of news because, you know, we've been led to believe that by the Western media, by Western politicians, that all this money, all of these weapons that the Western powers have been giving to Ukraine, they've been trying to make it look like it's been worth it, but it really has not been. Russia is accomplishing its objectives there. That's those are the cold hard facts that that Russia has been saying for a while, and now the Ukrainian side has even admitted, and we've also heard from Western officials even. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but for those of you that are in the chat asking where I'm streaming from Moscow right now. So sorry, buffered a little bit there. So yeah, basically we've heard that Ukraine's not doing well over there. There's a lot of things we can say about this specifically. We have also, yes, I do have access to Western media, as I've been watching CNN and MSNBC as this conflict has been unraveling, you know. But, I mean, the first thing I want to draw your attention to, since this is the first thing in this chronology of events that I want to talk about, is the surrender of Ukrainian troops at Azovstal in Mariupol. I put a link actually to our Telegram channel, the Revolution Report Telegram channel, at the top of the chat. You can see there I just posted pictures of some of the tattoos that can be seen on the Ukrainians that were taken prisoner there by Russian forces, and in cooperation obviously with the Donetsk People's Militia. And you can see plain and simple that, you know, these people that were holed up in Azovstal, these people who were receiving money and weapons from Western governments to fight the Russians, specifically the Azov battalion, which is the biggest, but not only, of course, neo-Nazi battalion in the Ukrainian military. You could see right there, Nazi tattoos, you know, they're wearing them proud, they have them all over their body. And these are the people that have been taken prisoner by Russian and DPR forces. These are the people that have been terrorizing Donbass for the past 8 years, long before Russia began its special military operation there. And this is the point of why Russia this is one of the goals that Russia had in going into Donbass and helping the People's Republics fight Ukraine. It was for denazification. So right now we're seeing one of Russia's main objectives in this special military operation being accomplished. And it's important to note that these neo-Nazis that have been taken captive, they're in the custody of the DPR administration, the Donetsk People's Republic. And the head of the People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, he has said that there is going to be a tribunal for them. This is something that Russia said at the beginning of the military operation as well, that they set up an investigative committee, and they had long-term plans to have sort of court proceedings for these neo-Nazis that have been committing war crimes in Donbass for the past 8 years. And now that's finally gonna happen, according to Denis Pushilin. He said that the first stage of the tribunals and the court process should be done by the end of the summer. So we're really going to be seeing like Nuremberg 2.0 here, which is great. That's an accomplishment of one of Russia's main objectives in this special military operation. And it also, again, flies in the face of Western propaganda, Western officials saying that these, Javelin missiles, Stinger missiles that were given to, Javelin missiles specifically, Javelin missiles, Javelin rocket launchers, the NLAW rocket launchers that the British gave to the Ukrainian military, the loads of equipment, $40 billion now Congress has agreed to give to Ukraine in this conflict when, Americans don't even have free healthcare, don't even have free education. The economy is decaying because of the Western sanctions against Russia, because of this conflict, because of basically all the decisions of Washington. And Russia's winning in the conflict. I think we're going to see a rapid pivot in the Western media in terms of their narrative very soon about that, because it's just really today and yesterday that we first started getting the first signs of this. The thing we can look at specifically, like I said at the beginning of this live stream, was the fact that Alexei Arestovich, who is the presidential advisor to Vladimir Zelensky, said that the situation is critical in Ukraine. And also, this was tied into something else he said. Basically, he was addressing Western officials who are more and more saying that Ukraine is going to have to make some territorial concessions. I mean, they're going to have to become more conciliatory. They're going to have to make territorial concessions for the sake of peace, because the Ukrainian government has long said they're just not even going to give up their claim on Crimea. They want their borders to be pre-2014, which is just, unfathomable. That's just not going to happen. Crimea is part of Russia already. And tied into this statement that Arestovich made, he told these Western officials who are calling for Ukraine to become more conciliatory, he told them to go F themselves. I'm not going to use the actual word because then we'll have to, put a age restriction on this video. But he literally told them to go F themselves. We've been doing a story about this at Russia Today all day, and just because some Western officials are suggesting this. The biggest example of Western officials saying this, really the only concrete example we have right now, because the fact that Western officials have been suggesting this has only been made public by Ukraine's presidential administration. They didn't use any names or anything, but at the World Economic Forum in Davos yesterday on Wednesday, the former U.S. Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, said that basically Ukraine is going to have to accept the status quo when it comes to territorial considerations. Basically, that means he's calling for Kiev to give up its claim on Crimea, and basically, saying, I mean, it's a little less clear about Donbass because the territorial, where it was territorially before Russia's special operation was up for debate when it comes to different perspectives here. The People's Republic said they were independent. Russia didn't recognize them as independent until right on the eve of the beginning of the Russian military operation, and Ukraine just considered it part of its own territory. But we've got Henry Kissinger basically saying that Ukraine's got to give up this crazy idea that they're actually going to get Crimea back, especially now the kind of position they're in militarily. They're even, they never had a real chance of winning, in my opinion. And second of all, they're on the back foot now. So that's an interesting thing to consider, especially with, what we've been hearing in the media. Some other stuff I want to bring your attention to in connection to this is that the LPR government recently said that they've retaken 95% of the territory of Lugansk. So that's another thing to consider. Basically, all of Donbass has been retaken by the People's Republics, and this was one of the major goals of the Russian military operation. It was to protect the integrity of the People's Republics. We can't forget that, this narrative that the Western media is trying to put forward, that Russia was planning on a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that they wanted to take over the country. Before the special operation even began, there was stuff published in The Sun, in Bild, like these tabloid kind of newspapers of the Western media, that Russia was planning an invasion to set up concentration camps for people who opposed Putin, that they were going to overthrow the government and install a puppet government. That was actually never Russia's stated goal, and I don't think it's their unstated goal either. You have to take into consideration that it would take an enormous amount of resources to install a puppet government and then deal with the inevitable, insurgency that would follow that, when in this case, they can defend the integrity of the People's Republics, which declared independence. And then after, since Ukraine has been fighting for so long already, 3 months, it's been, it's had a dramatic effect on their economy as well. I've lost my train of thought. Basically, So basically, with the economic problems that they're going to have to deal with in relation to them continuing to fight, even though it's fruitless, and not even saying they're not up for a peace deal that cedes any sort of territory of Ukraine that they consider to be part of Ukraine. It's a lot better for Russia not to overthrow the government, but have the current Zelensky administration take care of, the consequences of fighting that long of a war in Ukraine. That's another thing that's important to keep in mind. And Zelensky himself said this at Davos when Henry Kissinger made that comment about how Kiev has to make some sort of concessions. He said that Kiev is not going to accept anything less than pre-2014 borders, which includes Crimea. And he also said that he felt like he was in the Munich conference in 1938. Another comparison between Nazi Germany and Russia, which is like completely unfounded, since, again, it's in the Ukrainian military where there are armed neo-Nazis fighting within the ranks. There are not armed neo-Nazi formations in the ranks of the Russian military. Putin's not a Nazi, so it doesn't really make any sense. But he basically said, he compared Davos to the Munich conference because he called these concessions the same. Well, he implied that they were the same sort of ballpark as the appeasement of the Western powers of Nazi Germany, but that's nothing new. So basically on that, in terms of the Azov neo-Nazis, these people with Nazi tattoos that have been taken prisoner, basically the hopelessness of the Ukrainian war effort at this point, I basically said everything I wanted to say in relation to that. The next thing I wanted to talk about on this live stream was a specific U.S. State Department propaganda project aimed at Russians specifically. It's called "What is a Special Military Operation?" Now, I'm going to share it in the chat of this live stream right now so you guys can follow along with me. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold and I've got some allergies now. My apologies for the coughing. But this link I just shared in the chat, you should take a look at it right now so you can follow along with me. As you can see, it's a U.S. government website. And the first thing you can see, if you scroll down a little bit, is, TASS, a Russian media outlet, talking about the special military operation when it first began. Russian President Vladimir Putin on February 24th launched a special military operation in Ukraine. He said Moscow had no plans for an occupation of Ukrainian territories. The sole purpose is the country's demilitarization, denazification. The Russian Defense Ministry says its forces are not attacking cities. Their focus is entirely on military infrastructures. Civilian population is not in danger. Now, obviously, right after that, you see pictures of, civilian infrastructure being bombed. You see things that appear to be contradicting these statements. And just as a misnomer to all this, just as a kind of rebuttal to these claims, the Russian military operation is not actively attacking civilian. It's not, trying to attack civilian infrastructure. But one of the strategies that the Ukrainian military, especially these neo-Nazi armed groups, have used since 2014. You can look this up also. This is what the Russian government's been saying, but it's also widely cited in United Nations human rights reports. The Ukrainian military specifically positions its military infrastructure and, not just its military infrastructure, but also tanks, armored vehicles, soldiers. They specifically go next to civilian infrastructure so that they can draw fire. When they draw return fire, it's more likely to hit civilian infrastructure. And then they take pictures of that and use it as propaganda, as you can see in this website. That's just one part of what's going on here. So it's really a war of propaganda. It's not as clear cut as this website is trying to show. And demilitarization, denazification, these really are the goals of Russia's military operation, as we just saw. But if you scroll through it, you'll see, attempts at Russia at making the Russian military operation look bad. But then at the end, if you scroll all the way down, scrolling. This is the main part of, this is the main purpose of this this project by the State Department. And I'm sure there are more projects like this. They're trying to, get this kind of Western propaganda narrative of the Russian military operation to Russians at, any way they can. But at the end, you see this how you can help section. And there's three things that you can see. The first is basically a link for Westerners to set up VPN servers that Russians can use, I guess, to watch Western propaganda, even though, VPNs are available here in the first place. I have one. I'm in Moscow right now, and actually that's what was messing up the live feed. I got to make sure it's off from now on. I didn't know it would interfere with it. But the second one is a link that would allow someone in the West to send a propaganda message to Russians in mass. This is to random Russians. And the third one is it allows you to send an email to Russians in mass, spreading some sort of Western propaganda message. And obviously it's putting it forward as, Western propaganda message. And obviously it's putting it forward as, trying to help Russians learn the truth about what's going on in Ukraine. And so I bring this up because I just want to bring to your attention the fact that, this is not just an information war in the media, but also the State Department is actively using all of the resources at its disposal to convince Russians of a very specific narrative. There is no dichotomy that the West tries to have us believe, that the Western media is free because it's independent somehow, and Russian media or whatever media of any enemy of the United States is just unfree because it's maybe funded by the state or whatever, even though there are state-funded news outlets in the West that they for some reason don't consider to be unfree media, like the BBC. They get money from the British government, just as, for example, the Russia Today gets money from the Russian government. But the funniest, I mean, I guess the way they see it can be described by Twitter's policy on it. They differentiate, for example, BBC from Russia Today by saying that that the government in Russia exerts editorial influence on Russia Today, while in the UK it does not on the BBC. I mean, I don't really understand how they qualify that or anything, but I mean, I work at Russia Today. There's not some government bureaucrat breathing down my neck telling me what to write. So anyway, it's a very specific propaganda narrative, and it just goes to show that, you know, the Western narrative here it doesn't have anything to do with freedom. They're trying to sell a narrative that is in support of this Ukrainian leadership, these Ukrainian neo-Nazis that are really, I mean, crazy. That they're not willing to even give up, knowing they're on the back foot. They will surrender nothing. You know, it really looks like they'll just fight down to the last man, even though there's no way they're going to get Crimea back. There's no way they're going to beat the People's Republics at this point. And that's even shocking to the Western officials that were supporting them. But to be honest, it doesn't really surprise me that much, because the U.S. has had a long history of kind of supporting these types of people, these types of organizations throughout, for example, the Cold War and Afghanistan. They were like, well, these mujahideen, they're, you know, a bit nuts, but they're against our enemy, the Soviet Union, so we'll just support them. It's pretty much similar situation here, I gotta say. And that's not to say that all Ukrainians are nuts. I'm not saying that. There's, you know, I'm not talking about this as a blanket statement of all Ukrainians. I'm talking about Ukrainian leadership and political and military, and these neo-Nazis that are doing the majority of the heavy lifting against Russia. Now, I am going to address your questions at the end, by the way. I'm just going to go over one last thing here, and then we'll get to questions. You can ask me anything about the state of the economy here in Russia, sanctions, whatever. But the last thing I wanted to talk about a little has a little bit to do with Ukraine, but also has to do with the channel and myself. I'm actually we're going to be using the Revolution Report. We're going to be having it cooperate with the Center for Political Innovation a lot more from now on. What is the Center for Political Innovation? It's a leftist think tank, a patriotic socialist think tank in the United States. And I'm the editor-in-chief of it. We're going to be launching a news outlet called Main Trend News. And so this is going to be, the Revolution Report's going to be on that website. Our videos and our streams are going to be there as well. And there's a lot of really bright, interesting, smart people that are working on it with me, that are correspondents, writers. We've put out a lot of articles already on a wide array of topics, and I want to put some of the links to those articles in the chat right now. This one is actually it's called Ukrainian Neo-Nazis Far from Fringe. This is actually an article that was written about one of the videos we made here on this channel. So if you haven't seen it, you should really go into the videos of this channel, look up Ukrainian neo-Nazis, anything but fringe and far from powerless. This is it unfortunately was age restricted, but it's a very informative video that I made about the the real scope of neo-Nazism in Ukraine, politically, throughout the military, the sort of specific neo-Nazi armed groups that were operating in the Ukrainian military, but are likely not operating anymore since Russia's been denazifying pretty successfully the Ukrainian military. So that is a good article. We've got a lot of other articles. For example, Congress is making a killing off of weapons. This is connected to how basically This is connected to basically about how the U.S. Weapons industry is making a killing off of what's going on in Ukraine, and about how obviously they don't want the conflict to come to a close, and also they're kind of hoping for another conflict to arise with Taiwan and China. You know, a lot of people are drawing parallels between what's going on in Ukraine with the possibility of what could happen in Taiwan. Even the United States government said that, I'm pretty sure it was the Pentagon actually, but don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. They said that they're going to be using a lot of experience that they've gained in the Ukraine conflict in a potential conflict in Taiwan, specifically that they understand better what kind of weapons to give to Taiwan in the event of an outbreak of hostilities with China. That's really concerning, and that's definitely something that the U.S. weapons industry would be more than happy about. So that's written about in the article. Make sure to check that out. And there's another article here by another great writer we have. It's called Russia Derangement Syndrome: Who Started the War? Based on the title, I'm sure you can get the gist of what it's about. It's about the fact that NATO, the kind of imperialist nature of NATO, is really the root cause of what's going on right now with the conflict in Ukraine. Yes, Russia attacked Ukraine, but it's a lot more complicated than just understanding it like that. There was a war going on there for 8 years already, and it took place after an illegal coup d'etat backed by NATO and Europe and the United States took place in 2014. You know, it's really there. This coup d'etat that was backed by the West in Ukraine, it starts from there. This whole saga doesn't start from Russia attacking Ukraine. So, and it can be also explained by, Lenin's theory of imperialism. Lenin's writing Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. This is something that the writer Charlotte talks a lot about in the article, so definitely an interesting read. Give it a read when you have the chance. So yeah, basically, I wanted to talk about that. We're going to be doing a lot more cooperation with CPI, and yes, we're gonna see how we can maybe combine our videos, do a little coverage over in the United States on this channel, bring some people from that organization into helping this channel as well, and we're going to be helping them. So it's a lot of interesting developments. So that's all I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to open it up for questions right now. And the first thing I saw was that about Haas, because someone wrote, "Isn't CPI the thing Haas is affiliated with? Doesn't he have some problematic takes?" I want to talk about this from the outset because a lot of people ask this. Haas is not a member of CPI. He did give a speech at one of the organization's events. He does have a lot of problematic takes. I don't agree with a lot of what he says personally, but he's not a member of the organization, so he doesn't speak for the organization in any way. Who's the guy in the picture behind you? That's a good question. It's first of all, speaking of the background, usually I have a flag back here, but I tried to put up the Soviet flag. The pins that hold it to the wall broke. But in future videos, we will have a Soviet flag there. This guy behind us here is, his name is Zakharchenko. He was one of the leaders of the Donetsk People's Republic, one of the original leaders, when the People's Republics of Lugansk and Donetsk were declared in 2015. 2014 or 2015, I forgot the exact year, but yeah, he's considered a big hero in Donetsk. There's even a huge memorial around the place where he was murdered by the Ukrainian military. They set up an improvised explosive device at a cafe that he went to regularly. Actually, he was the head of the Donetsk People's Republic, head of the the entire republic, and he went to this cafe that was accessible to anyone every day to have breakfast and his morning coffee, and people would come up to him. He'd have chats with people. The head of the republic. He was a real man of the people, and people there really loved him. So that's who he was. I actually got that portrait of him when I was there filming our documentary for The Revolution Report, which is going to be out soon. I'm working on it a lot, but tons of other stuff's getting in the way. Still, it's going to come out. It's going to be a really interesting documentary. And so, yeah, that's where I got the portrait. Do you have any shortages in Russia now? How are prices in everyday life? That's a good question. No, there's not shortages of anything here. And in fact, I have noticed that prices have risen quite a bit. I have to say that the Central Bank of Russia has said that this year so far the inflation rate has been between 15 and 20%, which is high, So I have seen prices rise a little bit. In terms of shortages, there aren't any though. And you know what? Because of the fact that Europe is dependent on Russian oil, and now Russia has said you either have to pay in rubles or you're not getting any Russian oil at all, that significantly strengthened the ruble in relation to Western currencies like the dollar and the euro and the pound. It's at a level, it's at such a strong level. It's the strongest that it's been since like 2014 or 2015, so that's good news for the Russian economy. We're not doing too bad here. To be honest, I think it's a good thing that a lot of fast food outlets have left. It's good for the health of the population. I mean, it just goes to show how like Western decadent society really thinks that depriving Russia of things like McDonald's and certain types of luxury clothing, that anyone in Russia is going to lose sleep over that. We're not. It's like it's ridiculous. And plus, even McDonald's has I don't know if you guys know, but McDonald's has recently sold its holdings in Russia, which they suspended before. They sold their holdings in Russia to someone else. So McDonald's is going to reopen in Russia, just under a different person, not the McDonald's International Corporation. And according to the mayor of Moscow, the menu is going to stay the same. I personally think that McDonald's cut a deal with this guy. I mean, I don't have anything to base this off of. This is just my speculation. But I have a feeling that McDonald's cut a deal with this guy. They're still going to be raking in the profits, and they're going to be able to pay lip service to the Ukrainians at the same time. I mean, none of these companies really care about human suffering or anything. They're just trying to make money, and so to have their cake and eat it too is what they're looking to do, and that's what I think McDonald's is doing there. Where do you draw the line between national chauvinism and progressive patriotism? This is a good question. I think, first off, I want to say I think one of the exciting things about working with Center for Political Innovation is going to be developing a theory of patriotic socialism so that it can be much more concrete than what it is now. I mean, it's a new idea that's emerged in the American left, and we have to develop it as a theory. But where do I draw the line? I mean, national chauvinism is, supporting your government, your bourgeois government in a war, for example, because of the fact that because basically what Trotskyists are doing right now in terms of the conflict in Ukraine. I mean, the Trotskyists that are saying Russia is an imperialist power and that they and that Ukraine should be supported. Sure, they say that the United States is also an empire and they shouldn't be supported either. But by supporting Ukraine, you're supporting a patron state of the United States, which is the biggest empire, capitalist empire in the world right now. That's national chauvinism. You're supporting a capitalist war. Socialist patriotism is just about basically admiring the good things. Trying to bring attention and admire the good things about your culture while, rejecting the bad. I made a tweet about this recently, and I think it pretty much sums up the way I feel about it. All cultures have redeeming aspects and negative aspects. And we're not going to be able to organize the masses without capitalizing on the positive aspects of this common culture we all share. People just aren't gonna support a political party that is saying that we should whip ourselves because we're living in the worst empire in the world. It's really not everyone's fault. It's a lot more gray. It's a lot more complicated than that. So I think we should reject the reactionary things about American culture and embrace the revolutionary things. That's it. Let's see, what other questions we got here? Well, okay, on the question of not needing to make new labels, because I see Sus here is saying no need to make new labels, all Marxist-Leninists have always been patriotic, it's redundant. I don't know, I agree. Historically, that has been the case. Successful Marxist-Leninists have been patriotic throughout history, but in terms of the Western left, a trend has developed that was not there before, in terms of basically self-hatred of one's culture in the West, saying that there's no reason to organize in the United States because it's just well, I'm trying to say this without using curse words, so this video doesn't get age restricted. But the United States is just like a trash bin, and there's no reason trying to organize there because the government is so terribly imperialistic. People are so brainwashed that it's not worth it. It's like a kind of third worldist idea. This is something that we didn't, it wasn't part of the discussion, I would say, in. Certainly not in around the time of the Russian Revolution, and I don't know so much about the history of the Chinese Revolution, but I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that there weren't people saying that back then either. This is a uniquely modern Western leftist phenomenon that needs to be countered by this by the development of a new theory of patriotic socialism, I think. And Arminius in the chat section also says, well, socialist patriotism is not new at all. Even the CPUSA had it for ages in their program. That's entirely true. We're kind of, the reason patriotic socialism has emerged as a tendency in the American left is really because people, the American left is failing. And people are looking for answers as to why. And I think patriotic socialism is one of those answers because it goes back to the most successful period of the labor movement, the radical labor movement in American history, which was the Communist Party of the 1930s, which used a lot of patriotic imagery, American flags, Abraham Lincoln. I'm sure a lot of you, if you're watching and you're leftists, you know that famous picture of the Communist Party Congress where it has a giant sort of socialist, realist-looking face of Abraham Lincoln, So that was when the Communist Party's ranks were the largest throughout all of American history. And that is a time period that leftists and communists really have to take after. They need to examine this time period and take what was successful and, leave what was not. What do you think about Finland entering NATO? What is the general view of people in Russia about the special operation? That's a good question. I want to about the Finnish thing. That's I'm going to start there because I'm going to combine this with these recent the recent wish of Finland and Sweden to join NATO, and the fact that Turkey basically was the one member state to reject their application. I think Turkey did this so that, if you guys have been following the news, Turkey just launched their own military operation in Syria. And if we remember history, Russia has long supported the Syrian government. I think Turkey blocked these two countries from NATO membership in the hopes that when they would launch this military operation in Syria, not so long after that, Russia would turn a blind eye. And so far, it looks like that's what the plan is. That's what I think. But what is the second part of your question? What do people in Russia think about the special operation? Well, young people in Moscow who tend to be the most liberal, a lot of them are against it. But we've seen the fact that Vladimir Putin's approval rating has actually gone up since the beginning of the special operation significantly. Most of the country, I think, supports it. I think the vast majority. And another indication of that is that the protests that emerged after the beginning of the Russian special operation were pathetically small. If you compare them to the kind of protests that we saw during the COVID lockdowns, those protests back then were enormous. And across the entire country in Russia, the amount of people that were arrested in protests across the entire country were counted in the hundreds. It was like between 300 and 400 people across the entire country, when we were talking about thousands back when COVID was the issue. So I'm really of the mindset that Russians support this special military operation, especially because a lot of people have, friends and family that were living in Donbass, or at least have friends who know people from there. This conflict is a lot closer to Russians than it is to Europeans, especially because these people in Donbass also consider themselves Russians, and it's only been really Russian media that's been covering that conflict throughout the 8 years that it's been going on before the special military operation. So Russians have been exposed to this information. They know that people there have been bombed by neo-Nazi battalions for so many years. In the West, people never really knew about it. It was easy to sell as just an invasion that Russia decided to randomly attack Ukraine for some genocidal purposes, but that's obviously not the case. And the last question I'm going to answer here are, what are my thoughts on gun ownership? Obviously, this question is connected to the recent school shooting in the United States in Texas that took place in Texas. I personally don't think gun control, stricter gun controls, looser gun controls, I don't really think it's that important. I think it's not connected to the root of the problem, which is alienation in late stage capitalism in the West. If you follow my Twitter, I made some tweets about that. I really think that people are extraordinarily alienated in our generation. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's connected to the sort of like nihilistic amounts of sex and violence in capitalist media, in our culture. I think it's also connected to and maybe I mean, this is maybe you'll laugh at this, but I also think it's connected to the fact that capitalist society doesn't give people any sort of purpose aside from making money. You know, I highly doubt there will ever be school shootings like this in like North Korea, or if the Soviet Union was around, if there would be school shootings there, because the state gives people a very clear purpose, and if you don't agree with that purpose, then you still have a purpose to oppose that purpose. But late stage capitalism has this sort of strange overarching nihilism that is obviously affecting people on a very significant level. That's all I have to say about it. So, individualism definitely disturbs people, and it's a messed up ideology. I think the only solution to that is to solve the problem of alienation in capitalist society, and create a more collectivist society that gives people a purpose in life. You know, that steers. You know, a lot of people need to be steered in the right direction, and you know, media. That's the point of media to begin with. I mean, we don't have to look at it as like the government should tell you what to think, or either it tells you what to think or it doesn't tell you what to think. Even in capitalist society where the government doesn't overtly give you an ideology to follow, the media is still, you know, intended to control what you are thinking. I mean, people think they come to these conclusions by their own free will, but the media is what manufactures consent. I mean, you could read that book, Manufactured Consent by Noam Chomsky. It's a really good description of that. But we need basically a society that encourages people to strive towards something in their lives. Basically, I mean, in the USSR, that the clearest example is socialism. People were building communism. They had a very clear goal in mind, and there were very specific principles on how to do that. They were enshrined in the Soviet Constitution. You know, there were social rules, and I think that's something we don't have in American society. In Russian society, a lot of them have just have been inadvertently held over from the Soviet period, which is interesting, and that's why I think Russian society is a lot more cohesive than American society right now. But anyway, I think that's all I'm gonna go through on this live stream. Sorry, I was a bit all over the place before I did this live stream. I worked all day, and then I drank some tea and it went down the wrong tube and the new microphone. But I'm going to be trying to do live streams kind of every week at this point, so we can talk a bit more about recent events, and you can ask your questions more often. So make sure to stay tuned on the community section of the Revolution Report, because I'm going to be posting when we're going to be doing those there, as well as on Patreon. Make sure to help support us there, or you could follow our website. We also put up updates there. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us and watching, and workers of the world unite. See you next time on the Revolution Report.